That's a great quote you already had. Let's talk about that.
It's a great quote. I mean, the Devils. Yeah. Design of Matzah. And Timo Meyer, Andre Flop, and Matzah.
We see you, you know that.
Coffee will be here shortly.
Do you still have like your
You can use ice cream.
Yeah, no. Every right now.
And I tried to record it.
Yeah, on the way.
On the computer.
On the way.
Somebody's got to be the guy.
Okay, welcome.
You did?
It's not the Iron Curtain.
I mean, it wasn't.
What's it?
He's not back in an hour.
It was, yeah.
No,
It was what I was saying. Like, we're gonna already leave the thing.
Okay.
What?
Wait, that happened.
I thought I saw Mr. Mayor up here today.
So I believe 7 years ago.
He's getting coffee.
Every season.
Oh, he's the coffee man.
Like,
Where's he getting coffee from?
Rosh Hashanah.
Dunkin' Donuts in Hollywood.
No.
Okay.
Your field, there's Marma Kovos over there.
People like idiots on the sunset.
Okay, good morning.
You're back.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Some from far and wide. I think I've Talmud Eretz Yisrael just last week. So welcome everybody. Today's share is entitled Shmura Matzah, the expensive ingredient of Shmira. Now, I did an unofficial survey. How much do you think a pound of matzah costs? A nice pound of matzah.
Hand matzah or
hand matzah.
$32.
$32 is a pretty good price.
Broken or unbroken?
I'll get to that.
That's what I paid, $32.
My hand matzah, which I get, the price is now up to $40 a pound. $40 a pound. 1 pound of matzah. Now, I think about it. In 1 pound of matzah, how many, we'll talk about shleimim or not. How many pieces of matzah are there in a pound?
Broken or whole?
6 to 8.
I would say, yeah, if you go 6 to 8, that means I'm paying over $5 per matzah. Right? You're generous, you have 8, paying $40. Right? That's $5 a matzah. And if you have less than 8, you're paying more than that. More than that, probably for sure. That's quite a steep price. And, somebody asked me, what's the hot topic this year for Pesach? Matzah is always the hot topic every year for Pesach. Because the price of matzah does go up. And, there are factors. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world. There's been some war going on there for the past while. Definitely affects things to some degree. And there's general inflation. And you never have a year that the price of lulav and esrogim, matzah goes down. It only goes up, one direction. So, okay. But in today's share, we look to explain what goes in, what's the expensive ingredients of matzah.
Labor.
Oh, yeah, no, I saw a thing. I actually was going to bring in the advertisement. Someone came up, they're mass producing your own private matzah oven. some Jewish culinary, appliance place made a matzah oven. It says on it, L'shem matzah's mitzvah.
Those get hot.
It's electric.
Yeah.
The whole thing of a matzah oven has to be crazy, crazy hot, right? Not like anything we have. So, to be honest, I'm a little skeptical. The regular matzah ovens in the big bakeries are not electric, right? They have wood and they're just burnt, real old-fashioned ovens. This one is fake. It's electric. They have the wood pieces there, but it's like the electronic fireplace. Except this one's supposed to burn crazy hot. They advertise, they have a picture of a Hasidish, it looks like a Rebbe over there, putting in his matzahs. Now, okay, if it's for a smaller matzah bakery, if you put in your house, you really have to know what you're doing with making matzahs. Otherwise, you could get into big trouble. In fact, I just asked somebody, what does, your father do, this Rav do? He says, he doesn't bake matzahs. He doesn't want that responsibility of making sure that everything gets right. It's a big deal. So matzah bakeries is not really a sport for the average person just to get into. I wouldn't eat those matzahs so quickly. We'll talk about that.
Homemade matzah is not the thing.
Homemade matzah is not the way to go. So you're going to have to go out and spend money and buy matzahs, okay? But really, what I want to talk about today also will lead in, okay, if you have to have Shmura matzah, when do you have to have it? Someone made a comment to me, Rebbe, and I thought it was an interesting comparison. Is Shmura matzah chumrah just like, Chol Yisrael? Look, Chol Yisrael, quote unquote, right? Now, Chol Yisrael might be a chiyuv too. Is a chiyuv too. I should say the words might. Right? You have to have your milk watched that by Jewish people, or to know that it's cow milk. There's a chiyuv Shmira there. We'll see soon. There's a chiyuv Shmira by your matzah. One has to watch their matzah. But we'll see for what matzah, how much watching has to be done. And that itself could make for an expensive ingredient. Now, you'll find these other products. You'll see, sometimes you see 18-minute matzahs.
I've seen that.
Right? You see, regular non-shmur matzah. We could talk about machine matzah versus handmade. These are all topics I want to talk about in this morning's share. Now, the first thing, right? So everyone knows, a lot of people, if you ask them, why do you have shmur matzah? I don't know. I like the hand matzah, better. Tastes better. I'm not sure shmur matzah should taste better than non-shmur matzah. Same.
No,
right? The difference you might taste is the difference maybe between hand matzah and machine matzah, or different companies. Every matzah bakery, I'm sure it tastes a little bit different. They make it, some make it extra thin, and some people make it extra thick. And ask the dentist how well a business they do after Pesach.
breaks teeth.
Yes, just like in the Mitzrayim. So I would like, anyone who has Marmar Komos in front of them, I would like to first go to cut off some important lines. Here, I'll give you another scenario. Now, like many things Jewish, things are, like many things Jewish, things could be moneymakers. Running a matzah bakery is a major moneymaker. I'll leave out the name, but one of the biggest matzah bakeries in New York, fortunately the proprietor, the owner of the bakery passed away, and there's a dispute amongst the kids who gets control of the matzah bakery.
Is that Shaft?
So much of a dispute that it spilled over, like they weren't up to baking matzahs this year, to bake matzahs, on the industrial level. You're talking about by Hanukkah time, you're finished. Like it really has to be way, way, way earlier in the year. Sometimes you taste that. But you have to start baking so much earlier. And disputes and hawks, they weren't able to put it together for this year. I heard those are resolved, and they will have for next year. But this place serviced New York, serviced all the hotels, very, very famous matzah bakery. Yeah, it definitely could be a lucrative business. The question is, okay, so how do you run a business? What type of workers do you hire? Do you have to hire Jewish workers? Or can they be non-Jews? Do you those who are osik b'tzarch tzibur, we appreciate it very much.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Right, l'shem matzah's mitzvah is l'shma, and so do those who are osik b'tzarch tzibur. Yes, but so let me begin. While everyone tends to their needs, let me begin. This is Siman Taf Samach Sif Aleph. On your page is the first part of Taf Samach. I skipped the first line is on the other side. Ein lashon matzahs mitzvah v'lo oferoso al dei ein Yehudi v'lo al dei charesh shota v'katan. The halacha says you shouldn't. We'll talk about the exactness, which stage of the production we're talking about. He says you shouldn't knead the matzahs with a guy or a cheres, shota, and kata. So practically that means, and you'll find this, in kosher restaurants all across the world, you have Gentiles, you have nice Mexicans, nice, all different people working in Jewish establishments. And if Hashem Shad, you walk into a matzah bakery, you should not find non-Jewish workers. The halacha is that you can't knead the matzah with a chereshot of a katan, nor with a guy, which by definition, right, that means you can't have quote unquote cheap labor. Why can't you have these people do it? So if you look in the Mishnah Berurah, it's over there, Sivkot and Beis. Important to note. Here comes the matzah bakery owner. It says, Al Yidei Eino Yehudi, Atam Diksev Shmartem Es HaMatzos. The Torah writes you should watch the matzah. Right? It's not a spectator sport. What does it mean you should watch the matzahs? This shmira that you're doing, shel techmatz, that it should become chametz, is chav l'shem matzah shel mitzvah. You have to have kavana. You have to have das that it should be matzah mitzvah. V'nachri the chereshot v'katan labnei shimer ninu. They can't watch it. They can't have this das to do it l'shem mitzvah. V'skimu harbe poskim da'afil Yisrael omer al gavav. Even if you have a Jew there, umasirim sheichanu l'shem matzos mitzvah. Even if they tell you l'shem matzos mitzvah, right? It's a joke. It's not. It's hilarious. You sometimes see these workers. You have a nice Mexican worker in a restaurant in New York. He could speak Yiddish better than most of the guys in my share from Miami. The Mexican working in New York, for sure in Williamsburg, but even in Borough Park, Flatbush, the Mexican workers know Yiddish quite well. They could speak it, but that doesn't help, right? You could have them screaming L'Shem Matzos Mitzvah, and they scream L'Shem Matzos Mitzvah. They could mimic the Hasidic guy telling it to them. It doesn't help. It's a das. You really have to understand what it means, L'Shem Matzos Mitzvah. It's not just you repeat the words. So a Gentile would not be able to do those, Pashem Shad, would not be able to do that. And the first opinion is even b'diavad. Even if you're stuck, you cannot use Gentile workers. The Yesh min poskim, Chavetz Chaim brings down shemikimim ba'omer al gabav when mazhir sheichavnu b'asiyas l'shem matzah. The Azarina the daiti Yisrael kavit. And so there are some that are makel. If you're really stuck, right? Your community doesn't have matzah. You're not doing it for profit. The community doesn't have matzah. The only way you could pull off is if you employ non-Jewish workers. So there is a tzad in halacha that one could use non-Jewish workers as long as a Jew is standing there constantly. Chavetz Chaim writes this later. Constantly, not just one time, warning them, reminding them, L'shem matzos mitzvah. The Kasava Bach, Magen Avram, the Yesh Lismach Alei Kishiyav Shabin Acher. The Bach and the Magen Avram say that, you know what? This is reliable if you have no other way. So if your community doesn't have matzah, you would be able to employ Gentiles and just have one Jew standing there while they're kneading it, while they're baking it, and scream L'shem matzos mitzvah. Okay. Now, really, this halacha that we just saw is by what normally will take place in the matzah bakery. The matzah bakery really is the end of the process. That's where you're kneading the dough, and that's where you're putting in the oven. Those steps need to be lishma, need to shmartem es hamatzos. If you look in these next Shulchan Aruch I have down here, there's really two other major steps that also potentially need Shmira. Those steps are Hachitin sha'osim behem matzos mitzvah, the wheat which you're doing for matzos mitzvah. Tov l'shamulam shel yipol in mayim. It's good to watch them that water doesn't fall on them. Mishas ktsira, from the time that you harvest it, you cut it. L'pachas mishas tchina, or at least from the time you start grinding that wheat into a fine flour. V'shas atchad mutalika kemach min hashok. And if you're stuck, the Mechaber already says, then one would be allowed to purchase just plain, pure grain flour, and then do the later steps l'shma.
So it's gold medal.
Right, not gold medal, right? But here's the four steps. Again, you have the harvesting, you have the grinding. Those two steps seemingly are done outside of the matzah bakery. Inside the matzah bakery, they're going to add the water, right? We know matzah is two ingredients, flour and water. So they're going to add the water to the flour. At that point, the stopwatch starts. The moment you add the water, you have 18 minutes or bust. So they're going to have to make that into a dough. Once they have it as a dough, then they knead it. And the kneading has to be made l'shma. And similarly, the baking has to be done l'shma. Those are the four steps. So we see between these two Shulchan Aruchs, ideally, everything should be done. We'll see, l'shma. For sure, the latter two steps are things that should be done l'shma. But again, if need be, there is room. The Mishnah Berurah talks to us about hiring Gentiles and having a Jew stand there and sort of he'll be the das. He'll say l'shem matzos mitzvah and make that work.
How does the planting Shmura?
The planting of the grains. No, that doesn't.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Okay, right? I don't want to get into the whole Gebrux and all these, funny things. But the Pashut Pshat is the issue of grain becoming chametz. We only worry about from the time of the harvesting. Now, even the language of the Mechaber that said was tov l'shamra. It's good to watch it, right? Good sounds like this is l'chachila. So if you look at the Chavetz Chaim, the Bir Halacha, he writes, "V'das aprichadash achriya deshimer mishas ksira midinahu." Watching it from the time you harvest it is a chiyuv. It's midin. Ulikuva va'afil b'di'evet. Even b'di'evet. according to some poskim, if it's not Shmira, it's not watched from the time of the harvesting, then that will be a problem. Now,
Question.
yes.
Then what's the difference between Shmura matzah and regular matzah?
Okay, I'm going to talk about that in a moment.
18.
Yes.
Matzah.
Now they bring here at the end of this Bir Hagra, Bir Halacha, that the Gra is also machmer on Matzah Shmura from Shas Ktsira. And not only that, not just for the matzahs of the Seder, but for all matzahs that he would eat on Pesach. Now, let's pull back for a minute. And what is this din, ushmartim es matzos? You're supposed to watch the matzos. Now, really, there's two major opinions of this you find in the Achronim. What's the reason for this mitzvah? The mitzvah is ushmartim es matzos. You should watch the matzah. And we're talking about potentially watching matzah all the way from the time of the harvesting through the baking of the matzah. You think about it. I was talking about this case. I've noticed, where do they get the grain from? Satmar matzah bakeries get their grain is grown in Arizona. Good call. How'd you know that?
I saw a video on it like last year before Pesach.
Yes. Satmar, which obviously was responsible for, hundreds of thousands of people, right? They get their matzah, their grain, in Arizona. The Rebbe goes out there and who knows what. In the summer, they cut the grain. Now, what happens? How does the grain get from Arizona to Williamsburg? Truck, right?
There's a guy in the back of the truck.
That's what I tell people. There's a little Hasidic guy sitting in the back of the truck.
He has to be little.
Right?
Right?
Right? There's not so much room. They have lots of grain.
I hope it's
But seriously, right? Yeah, if they're watching Mishat Ktsira, so yeah, then you're going to need that transport. And transporting it from there has to be watched. Now, what does watching mean? So, the simplest idea that we will understand, the reason to watch, is to make sure there's no chametz. Now, that itself is hard to understand, because you tell me this pasuk, Torah wrote a pasuk, "Ushmartem es matzos." You should watch your matzos. Why are you supposed to watch your matzos? So it doesn't get chametz. Of course, I can't eat anything that's chametz on Pesach. That's what the Torah says. Thou shalt not eat chametz. What's special about your matzahs? You should watch your matzahs from chametz. I have to watch my everything from chametz. Dafka my matzah. So there are those that insist, no, this is a din for Shmira for matzah, and it's just a higher standard. For everything else, you can rely on chazakas and rovs, all different halachic mediums to assume there's no chametz.
There's no mitzvah to eat any other item specifically.
Okay, good. That's a very good point. True, but you can't eat anything that it says. It's not the positive; it's a negative. Thou shalt not eat chametz.
I understand that, but Lel Seder, you have to eat matzah.
True. Now I'm going to expand on that in a second.
Those are different levels, because you have Lel Seder, you have to eat it. The rest of Yom Tov, you don't have to eat it, but you get a mitzvah if you do eat it.
Right. So the classic understanding is this is just a higher standard when it comes to the matzah that we eat, more maybe than other products. Other products, I could assume there's no chametz if I have the halachic factors in there. But when it comes to chametz, that's not enough. When it comes to matzah, there you need an actively watch that there's no chametz on that. That's one idea. The other idea has nothing to do with chametz. The other idea that Achronim say, the reason why you watch the matzahs is what I can't describe it without another word. It's a lamda shadin. The idea is it's an ingredient, right? If I eat matzah, okay, maybe now some people have a minute not to eat matzah at this point in the year, but technically you eat matzah all year round. Is there a difference between the matzah you have all year round and the one you have now? The answer is yeah, it's triple the price, right?
So a few years ago we had kavana.
Not for Passover.
Right, not for Passover.
So a few years ago it was flour, water, and kavana. Now you're telling me it's flour, water, kavana, and Shmira.
Yes, this Shmira, this kavana, is what makes it into Matzah's mitzvah. You need that kavana to make that Matzah's mitzvah. Without that kavana, it's lacking that. So the first idea was the reason why you have this Shmira by Matzah is just an extra stringency. You watch it, make sure there's no chametz there. The second idea has nothing with that, nothing to do with that. It's not from chametz. In order to make this matzah that you could eat at the Seder, it has to be something that you fully are able to watch, and therefore you transform that halachically into matzah by the Seder. Yes?
I've heard there is a minhag to dafka by the matzah as early as possible, just so that you can be mekayim it at home, not just somebody doing shmira on the matzah while it's up until it's made and sealed.
That's a very interesting thing. I'm going to get back to that in a moment.
But
I'll get to that in a moment.
You can watch it.
But, so these are two ideas. The second idea, for sure, would be limited only to matzahs by the Seder. Pashtas. Right? This is shmarta matzahs. The matzahs are being yotzi the mitzvah of the Seder. Unless you extend, like you're saying, well, every matzah I eat, according to a gra, is a mitzvah, so then maybe every matzah needs a standard. Maybe. But that seemingly is a stretch. Pashup Shah, you would only need that second idea only for matzah's mitzvah. I saw Rav Moshe Feinstein use this explanation to explain in halacha we see, when do you for sure need this lishma? For the latter two stages, the lisha and the afiyah. You may not need this lishma, right? We said b'diavad, the Mechaber himself says, if you don't have that person sitting in the back of the truck, watching from Mishas Ktsira and onward, right? The Mechaber himself says, Shas T'chak, that's okay. So, why? Teretz says those first two stages are the shimur, the watching, it shouldn't become chametz. Okay, if you have it in vats, they're sealed in vats, and you know it's sealed. Okay, no water is falling on them. You know it's not chametz. So what more do you need? But if it's a second idea, you need to transform this into matzah's mitzvah. That might only take effect by the later stages when it's already a dough. You're kneading a dough. You're baking a dough. So that item you're transforming into matzah. By the grain, when it's in the earlier stages, you're not doing that. That's why specifically those stages need the active das of a person. Yes?
Is there any stage after the matzah has been completely made that it still needs watching?
So
in other words, when I bring it home to my house.
Very good point.
You know,
I'm going to get to that. It's a second.
There's no one there.
Excellent. So it comes out, and if you look, Harvey, look in your label. Next time you see the Shmura matzah, it should say, if you're getting your money's worth, it should say Shmura Mishas Ktsira. Shmura matzah from the time of the harvesting. That's what you want. You're paying the big bucks for it, right? If some guy sells it to you, you can see in a dark, alleyway, and sells you cheap Shmura matzah. Oh, I got it half the price. Yeah, because it's only
fell off the truck.
Right, it fell off the truck. Right? They weren't watching it on the truck. Exactly the point.
The matzah or the guy.
Mm-hmm. So don't go for the fake
If
matzah.
some Puerto Rican tries to sell you matzah.
Regarding the non-Jewish workers.
Yes.
With machine matzah, right? So
Oh,
so how are the
okay.
how are
I'm going to try to get the
workers,
machine
are they
matzah in a
the
second.
machine itself.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm trying to
You
get
need a guy there too. So.
excellent point.
they're alive.
In fact,
the
they-
machine isn't.
The argument you made is actually made by great people throughout the ages. Hold on.
Now one.
But let me do one more step here with hand matzahs before I press a button and we'll go to machine. But
Where does Costco fall?
the matzah you buy in Costco. So I'm going to get to that in a second. Listen to this.
What kind of matzah is that in Costco?
There's a very interesting halacha which most people don't know of.
Holy Land brand.
Look at Shmuel Kamenetsky quotes this on the bottom. In fact, there's a footnote there I still can't get over. Shmuel Kamenetsky, his Talmud wrote a whole sefer of halachas of Pesach, And one of the chapters is about baking matzah. There's a little footnote he has there that there's so many intricate halachas about baking matzahs. Instead of writing a sefer just in Hilchos Pesach, it deserves its own separate sefer on the baking of matzahs. And the author says he hopes one day to produce that sefer just on the baking of matzah. None other halachas of Pesach, just halachas of baking matzah. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to do. But here's a halacha which is not so well known. It's best for a person himself to be involved in the baking of his matzahs. Right? We know, okay, yeah, there's a mitzvah to build a sukkah. Okay? And if I pay, some kids, some Andrew Jacksons, right? I'll get my sukkah built. And the Jew's doing it. He's putting up the schach, the shma, right? I have to clean my car for Pesach. Oh, there are some businesses that can advertise all these things, right? When it comes to matzah, it's not that way. All those other things you view, there's a hechsher for a mitzvah. Okay? So you know what? I do it, someone else does it. Matzah baking is not a hechsher mitzvah. Matzah baking is a mitzvah itself. And really that is part of the idea why you find there are groups of people that rent out a matzah bakery. They're called a chabura. Usually they'll go in the first baking of the day. They'll bake their matzahs, and then they'll turn over the bakery to everybody else. We don't really have that yet in Florida.
We have people from Florida that go out and do that.
Well,
Right.
Rabbi Benziger used to go to Brooklyn.
Right.
The pleasure goes up also.
Right. People do this.
We rely on Rabbi Welch.
Oh, so I'm going to get to that in a second. Shh. Now, what's the mile of baking your own matzahs? So most people do it. The briskers do it for all their chumras. Somebody told me, Rabbi Schlussel recently, one of their rebbeim went to New York and was going to go to the matzah bakery in Lakewood. And they were going to let him in, but then they sort of told him, they didn't want him taking in guys to the matzah bakery. He says, there's way too many chumras going on over here. Like, it's better you don't see it. I hope it's just chumras, not kulas. That's why they didn't want him to see it. But sometimes chumras can lead to kulas.
It's like a sausage factory.
I've never been in one of those, but yeah, you never know what's going on. Sometimes it's better. Yeah, if you go into the kitchen, here, Achmil, you can testify to this. If you go into the kitchen, sometimes you don't want to eat what comes out of it. So yeah, I don't know. But most people think of going to a matzah bakery to bake matzah with their chumras their way. But there's a more basic reason to go bake matzahs. It's because there's a mitzvah of baking matzahs. If you buy your matzahs off the shelf in Costco, you don't get that mitzvah. But here's
That's not any different than going to any of the first store. That's not any different than going to a Jewish store either.
Correct.
Other than giving
right.
to a goy.
If you go to your Jewish store and you spend $40, $50, $60 for your pound of matzah, right? Mamish, you got the best esrog on sukkahs, and you got the best matzah. You might want to spend $60 on a pound of matzah. But if you buy it off the shelf, you missed out on your mitzvah of baking matzah. Now, I'll give one perhaps exception to that. You mentioned before Rabbi Welcher's matzah. So, this Rabbi Welcher, posik in Chavetz Chaim. So, I wanted to call the Welcher family beforehand to confirm this, but you knew that for sure when you said that statement. That he does it for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. So I assume that. But the halacha is, as Shmuel brings us down, you could get matzah baked for you with shlichus. The same way that we know shlichus works for other things in the Torah. You get married with someone else being your shliach. if you're too nervous to say the words Harei Mekudeshes, right? Where's, you have someone else do it for you. He just has to specify. It shouldn't be Harei Mekudeshes. It's Harei Mekudeshes Yitzi. But
he decides that he wants to marry her.
Right, the double cross shliach. We talk about that in Yeshiva. But the halacha is that you could use shlichos for the baking of matzahs. So that means even if you don't have your own personal chabura that you go in, but if you're part of a broader chabura, you know someone going to bake matzahs, right? You know this rabbi is going to New York to bake matzahs. Great, tell him, do me a favor. Could you be my shliach? Could you bake some matzahs for me? Right? Okay. You have to make sure he brings back matzahs for you. But he could be your shliach, and then you would get the mitzvah of baking matzahs. If you just buy off the shelf, which you have no connection to the people who bake the matzah, other than you're paying good money for it, that's not enough, and that wouldn't fulfill the mitzvah. People here asked, after the matzah is baked, let's say I bring it to my house, and I put it on the, in a place free from chametz. I'm very careful with those matzahs. Or even better, right? Part of the Shmira matzahs, right? Let's say you're in the matzah bakery. One of the things they do after they're baked is they put it into like these metal like receptacles, and they have someone there looking at each matzah. One of the tricky things is, let's say it's folded over. So the fear of something's folded, so then it wasn't fully baked, and it could be chametz there. So they check the matzahs. That even though it's already after the matzah is baked, but it's part of the process of sifting out what the matzahs are. That's also a din of Shmira matzahs. Okay, but once it's baked and put in the box, and brought to your house, there's no din of Shmira matzahs pashtus. That's what Rav Shmuel says. So okay, it could be some people have want to get it earlier, but Rav Shmuel says really the process ends in the matzah bakery. So if either A, you yourself get into the matzah bakery, or B, you hire someone to be your shliach to do that for you, appoint someone to be your shliach, that works. And I believe Rabbi Welcher works. That is a great thing. Now, machine matzah. This deserves its own share. Just a quick explanation, which you definitely have based on the share, is if this whole thing is adding this component of das, of Shmira, where do you have that when you press a button? Seemingly, it should be the same thing, the machine, as a guy doing it. And we said ideally a guy cannot do that. You could have Omen al Gabav. So when I press the button, part of this Rav Yonashan Steif 18-minute matzahs, they would have this shtick where it's automated, but it could stop before each process, and the first little step was done manually each time. Okay, and that added more. But there's, there are major poskim. I didn't notice this till I looked this up. Manashevitz matzahs. Mr. Manashevitz wasn't a mister. It was a rabbi. It was actually a Talmud of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. He's Manashevitz.
Started in Cincinnati, Ohio.
In what year?
Like 1880 something.
Not bad. The historians too.
I was a history major.
Yes. Mr. Manischewitz, Rabbi Manischewitz was the first one to bring machine matzahs here to America, but he did so with the blessing of his Rebbe Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. He got the blessing of another fellow Talmud of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, chief rabbi of New York. And as I say, the rest is history. So machine matzahs, yes, as long as that's within your halachic framework that's usable. Most people hold machine matzahs are good. Some people say they're even better than hand matzahs. The process is so efficient. There's less chance of chametz. Okay, we have these lishma issues, but the poskim say that it's considered lishma when you have in mind when you press the button and start the process. I would add one other interesting thing. You have this sometimes, and this was mentioned before, but just spell out the ramifications. Do you eat bisli on Pesach? Bisli are, for kids or your grandkids,
That's
super
kabrocks.
snacks. Huh?
That's kabrocks.
Okay. So one element is, like Ikabrooks. It's okay. Let's say Ikabrooks. Would you have, I specifically pick that as opposed to potato chips or something like that, corn. This is made out of grain, flour, Isli, right? So the idea is, if you're not makbid in Shmura matzah, except for the Seder, then it's fine to eat Isli on Pesach. But if you're makbid, and the Mishabura brings us down, in Tov Nun Gimel, the Mishabura brings down, this one I didn't get onto the sheets, but it's the Mishabura at the end of Daled. I'll read you his language. Kasra achronim da'afta midina in tzarech shimul l'shem matzah rak l'matzah shel lailas rishonos. Midin, you only need shmura matzah for the first night. The rest of the nights you could buy the cheaper matzahs, not shmura matzah. Avol l'shar yomim dai kishe'ein behem shas chametz. It's good enough that it's not chametz. Yisrael kedoshim heim. Interesting language. Jews are holy. V'nagol lasos shimur l'shem matzah b'chol matzos mishas tchina pachos mishas lisha v'ayin l'kama. So the Chavetz Chaim is advocating for the idea that one should potentially have shmura matzah the entire Yom Tov. So that would mean it's nogea many products. It's nogea bisli. It's nogea matzah meal, matzah farfel. All of these products that one would make in a kitchen, knedalach, with matzah products. If you accept this chumrah, which the Mishabur is bringing down, then you would not eat any products not made with shmura matzah. Bisli is not made with shmura matzah.
Hold on.
Yes.
All of these items.
Yes.
Right? If you're eating them, not Leil Seder, you're not doing it as I'm eating matzah.
Correct.
I'm eating this food.
Good point.
That is kosher Pesach.
Yes.
And it's a food. It's not
Yes.
matzah.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people believe that this is not matzah. This is food.
Right. But the idea would be it's an ingredient, though. So as long as the matzah is in the ingredients, first of all, leads to the hetzah thing, right? Let's say you have a kugel that has mixed in matzah. So yeah, that might be some form of kiyum of eating matzah. Eating matzah doesn't have to just be the round crackers when I lean to my left. Eating matzah is any type of matzah that your body consumes over 7 days of Pesach. You have matzah brine, matzah pizza, matzah this. That's all matzah. So any ingredient of matzah in this idea would need to be shmura matzah. Now, midin, you don't need that. You only need shmura matzah for the Seder.
Again, what I'm saying is, it's
you
not
would think
matzah. It's this product, and it happens to have the name on it.
But if
it's
it has,
matzah, but it's,
if it has shmura matzah, if it has matzah, one of the ingredients, a matzah meal, matzah farfel, any type of matzah farfel is like the growingness to the smallest degree. But if it's not shmura, it wouldn't be a kiyum of this mishabura. It's okay. You know, no one's telling you have to be machmer in that. But
Can you even get matzah meal? It's a Shmura matzah.
yes, you could get shmura matzah meal. Obviously, it's double, triple the price. You could very rarely find around here in Florida matzah farfel, which is super ground. The trick, all you have to do is put it in the blender, chop it up, but have in mind the Shem Matzah Smith. Thank you very, very much. Right? We should make a song, Shem Matzah Mitzvah. Be'ez Hashem, next Sunday is Rabbi Sharfman's Yortzeit. So I hope to have a shir on the Haggadah, on the process and the whole, on the Seder night, all about different things to do. Be'ez Hashem, next Sunday. Thank you very much. Hatzlacha on everyone's Pesach preparations, and thank you again for coming. No. But you can still come.
You can still come.
We'll see.